Antarctica, the world's longest and best-kept secret, shrouded in mystery, many have tried to explore its vast coastline and what lies beyond. However, because of the many legal restrictions and mountains of bureaucracy of the Antarctica Treaty, many have been prevented from independently exploring this icy wilderness. How many times have you heard someone say, "Why not just go down to Antarctica and explore it for yourself?" Or tourists go there all the time. Nobody is stopping you. Yes, tourists do go to Antarctica on guided cruises to a designated area where they are not allowed to get off the boat. You also can take an expedition to the South Pole on a structured and guided route you are not allowed to deviate from, and neither of these come cheap, the cruise being several thousands of dollars, while the expedition can be up to $100,000. But let's assume money isn't an issue and you want to explore Antarctica. On your own, this is where it starts to get tricky.
Sure, yes. If you go south on a globe, you're going to go to Antarctica. It's a continent on the bottom of the globe. If you go south on the plain Earth, then you're going to go out to the edge. And there is an overlap, and that's why flat earthers have been yelling for 7 years, allow us to privately explore there. If we're so stupid, just let us go there. Like, we're trying to book a trip right now for next year. It's not cheap. It's super expensive. And they're not going to let us even get off the ship. We're trying to find a special group that will let us get off the ship. And they're not going to let us. I've tried to reach out to them 5 different times with professional business LLCs, everything you can name. How do we get to go across Antarctica? I want to go across Antarctica and pop back up on the other side of the ball and just end this for good. You can't do it. No one's ever done it.
You keep bullying me,
he's gonna fly you out.
Can I just say one thing?
No, they right away they found more land and said we cannot let people know this because how?
I think you're onto something.
Well, how?
All right, and Hibbler, it's good to meet you, Hibbler.
Yeah, you too, man. Hopefully, we'll be in the studio soon so we can talk some more.
As soon as you want to come. I offered Eddie to fund a project with a research ship, and then we could just go to the end of it. Where's the wall? You're going to say Antarctic? What if I chartered an airplane in the summer, landed in Antarctica, and then asked them to fly over the rest of it? Let's say I flew down from Chile, and then I said, now I'm going to fly back over and go over to South Africa. Well, I think this is the ultimate quest, and I'll get on a plane with a bunch of you guys, and we'll go down there. I want to be convinced of this, and then I'm going to be the one that, like, gets the plane during the summer, and then we just fly across Antarctica and to the other side and debunk all this forever.
That'll never happen.
It'd be a top History Channel, Discovery Channel show. We'll have to fly down to Chile. We'll have to get the expedition, and we're going to fly across Antarctica to the other side.
You should still do. I remember on Rogan you offered to do the documentary, Eddie Bravo Finds the Edge of the World.
Well, I was dead serious because you could get a pretty big cargo ship that's safe down in Chile, and you're only then about a half-day sailing or less to Antarctica. And then during the warm season, you could circumnavigate Antarctica, and I think that would be a giant film. I would like to circumnavigate the Antarctica. They say it would take about a month to do. Nope, they say people have done it, but nobody's videotaped it. And then everybody denying it would then see the Earth is indeed a sphere.
That would be a great documentary. It's got to happen.
On a little peninsula, they got some penguins, and they have a pole that says, "Oh, that's a."
No, they admit that no one's allowed to. I don't care if they stop us. Eddie, let's go. Let's do it.
No. Now we're gonna go
find out how we pay to circumnavigate. And I said, I don't care if it's $2 million. They said no one will do it. Like guys, they just say no one does it.
Let's do it. So, and then I want you to document the process.
But since when have you heard? Because since when have you heard? You're gonna hit a brick we don't wall. Want your money. You can't do it. Well, imagine once you realize we don't know everything, we don't understand, and it's endless, and there's all this crazy crap. People go nuts. So they have to differentiate and create a model that allows them to put it in boxes so they can make it make sense because they can't handle it. And all of us get freaked out in the nature of the world. No one knows what the universe is. We don't have all the answers. So people can't handle that bigness. They can't handle that question, especially low IQ.
In other words, I can't even see Antarctica from the ocean without first obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department, or whatever department that controls that in your country. Taking a trip to the 60th South Parallel isn't going to accomplish anything, and so we're stuck with getting a government permit. So let's go through the steps to obtaining a permit from the U.S. State Department. This is the handbook of the Antarctic Treaty System. These are the rules that govern all signatories to the treaty. We'll be citing to it regularly as it lays down the rules that govern the Antarctic Treaty beyond the fluff of the treaty language itself. Most importantly, we're going to look at the rules governing non-governmental activities located here, and some of the rules regarding the protection of the environment located here. Now, as a U.S. slave, this is the first form you'll have to submit to get approved to travel to Antarctica. The form itself seems rather innocuous until you understand exactly what is involved in the application process. In summary, Antarctica is treated as a giant natural reserve. Like a military base, all activities and pathways in Antarctica must be approved. This is unlike any other area in the world, except maybe a place like North Korea. So, when I say that no independent travel is allowed below the 60th south parallel, I'm stating an admitted fact well recorded as international law. The protocol states, as a matter of principle, that all activities are to be planned and conducted on the basis of information sufficient to evaluate their possible impact on the Antarctic environment and its associated ecosystems, and on the value of Antarctica for the conduct of scientific research. Organizers should be aware that the environmental protocol requires that activities shall be modified, suspended, or cancelled if they result or threaten to result in impacts upon the Antarctic environment or dependent or associated ecosystems. If you visit Russia, with a Russian visa for example, are you limited to one particular neighborhood and certain pathways? For those who visit America as a tourist, are you restricted to New York City? Or are you generally allowed to travel around America? No one is just allowed to travel around Antarctica. All of your activities, vehicles, and pathways must be approved, but it gets much worse. Now, how many genuine people watching this video think that the purpose of seeing the edge, the dome, or the extended plain beyond Antarctica would be approved by the U.S. State Department and the other myriad of agencies? Are you ready to litigate the matter when some State Department official arbitrarily says something like, "I think your expedition is frivolous and would be too damaging to the environment, especially in the light of the frivolity of the expedition"? I don't think a court will overturn that decision, especially when treaty law supersedes any rights you may think you have. So, we're going to have to come up with some fake expedition that will somehow get approved. Let's say we're a tree-hugging Luciferian geologist conducting a comprehensive analysis of the global carbon footprint on Antarctica and its flora and fauna. I think that sounds plausible, and so we could hypothetically fake our way in with respect to our purpose, but it will be tricky. Okay, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. This is all theoretical. That brings us to the next point. Entire swaths of land are entirely off limits to all travel. These are called specially protected areas. It's pretty much guaranteed that no one is going to get a permit to go through a specially protected area. If my math is right, that's 1,373 square miles that are allegedly specially protected areas. You can see the maps on the websites, but I don't have time to plot all of them. Now, I agree that's not huge in comparison to the total alleged area of Antarctica. But I believe there's a distinct possibility that those swaths of land could be coordinated in such a way as to prevent me from going through Antarctica easily. So, right from the beginning, my route may be extra hard, especially if mountain pathways are blocked and the areas are much larger than claimed due to likely globe distance shenanigans. But let's go ahead and assume we can navigate around those prohibited, specially protected areas. Next, no motorized equipment is allowed at all for non-governmental personnel. Page 308 states, "Do not use aircraft, vessels, small boats, or other means of transport in ways that disturb wildlife either at sea or on land." That seems kind of hard and very subjective, doesn't it? Antarctica itself is supposed to have a diameter of 3,400 miles. That means no motorized equipment for at least a 6,800 mile round trip? That sounds pretty damn impossible, right? Especially if Antarctica is much bigger than what is claimed. What about sled dogs? Surely they'll be allowed. What's that? Sled dogs aren't even allowed? Okay, So our trip is now limited to a very long hike in insanely harsh conditions over an extreme rise of elevation. On a side note, Antarctica has the highest average elevation of any alleged continent, but I'm sure that's just coincidence, right? But getting back to our insane trip, we not only have to walk at least 6,800 miles, mostly depending on when we need to turn around, we must also tread extremely lightly, as walking on plants in Antarctica is prohibited. I can't damage plants or frighten wildlife on a 6,800 mile journey in a wilderness? I wonder if the Lewis and Clark expedition was limited by such requirements. Good luck traversing 6,800 miles on foot without damaging plants or frightening wildlife with no motorized equipment. I'm not saying that we couldn't figure out a way to get around these big issues, or maybe we could just, theoretically ignore the issues once we get there. But again, I'm not advocating that anyone break the law. I'm saying that these are listed enforcement rules under the Antarctic Treaty system. And so think of how easy it would be for one of the many international bureaucrats reviewing our application to deny a permit to trek across Antarctica based on this one plausible excuse. Sorry, you're going to end up walking on plants and scaring birds at least one time during your 6,800 mile journey, and the Antarctic Treaty system prohibits such activities. Application denied. For argument's sake, let's just assume we're going to figure out a way to get around that. Don't ask me how. The next issue is, how are we going to carry all that food and fuel for heat? And don't think that the Antarctic Treaty system isn't concerned with how we store our fuel. The United States itself is roughly 2,500 miles across. So imagine the difficulty of hauling food, climbing at extremely high and unknown elevations, and carrying all of your extremely warm gear and supplies across the United States from coast to coast and back again, all on foot with no food stops along the way. And don't forget, we're going to have to haul our poop as well. You are going to have to drag your poop with you on your 6,800 mile Antarctic hike. But it gets worse. Your poop is regulated by a different pseudo-government agency, the National Science Foundation. Here's where you can learn about what permit is required if you wanted to dispose of your poop on your 6,800 mile journey if you don't want to carry it. Could you imagine for your next trip to France and the custom agent saying, "Welcome to France. By the way, no vehicles are allowed, no animals are allowed, do not walk on any plants, and here's a bag for your poop. Be sure to bring a bag full." If you don't want to carry your poop, you're going to have to get a permit from the National Science Foundation. Enjoy your stay. But here's another and potentially bigger problem. What if there is no edge when you get there, but the conditions only get worse? How many years of supplies can one carry by a handheld sled and some skis? What if Antarctica goes beyond 3,400 miles? What then? When do you turn your back, and how do you prove it? Because the Globe shows are just going to call you a liar anyways. Any sane person right now would have to admit that our little trip is impossible, but we have a lot of paid-for apologists for our slave masters who will still somehow claim that I'm lying when I say that independent travel in Antarctica is prohibited. But we're not done. Going back to our form DS4131, in addition to disclosure to other parties to the treaty, the information provided may be shared with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to ensure compliance with 40 CFR Part 8 Environmental Impact Assessment of Non-Governmental Activities in Antarctica, as well as with other relevant U.S. agencies. This brings us to one of the most important issues facing us. What is an environmental impact assessment? No country, even North Korea, would ever require an environmental assessment before traveling across their country. It's insane. Here's the definition of an environmental impacts assessment in the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations. Environmental impact assessment means the environmental review process required by the provisions of this part and by Annex 1 of the Protocol, and includes preparation by the operator and U.S. government review of an environmental document and public access to and circulation of environmental documents to other parties and the Committee on Environmental Protection as required by Annex 1 of the Protocol. Well, let's see what the Committee for Environmental Protection says. Article 8 of the Protocol requires the parties to conduct environmental impact assessments for the activities and provides 3 levels of assessment according to the potential impacts of each activity. The procedures for environmental impact assessment are detailed in Annex 1 of the protocol. If a proposed activity is determined in a preliminary stage of assessment to have less than a minor or transitory impact, it may proceed. If an activity is determined as likely to have a minor or transitory impact, then an initial environmental evaluation must be prepared. If an initial environmental evaluation indicates the potential for more than a minor or transitory impact, or if such impact is otherwise determined to be likely, a comprehensive environmental evaluation must be prepared. Draft CEEs are made publicly available and considered by the CEP, which then advises the ATCM, and that's a Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting. Comments provided by other parties in the ATCM must be addressed in a final CEE, which is used as a basis for making a decision about whether and how the activity is conducted. Same law as here. It is the comprehensive environmental evaluation that's going to kill our expedition. Here's the regulation, and this applies to all signatories, including North Korea. Any operator who plans a non-governmental expedition that would require a CEE must submit a draft of the CEE by December 1st of the preceding year. Within 15 days of receipt of the draft CEE, EPA will send it to the Department of State, which will circulate it to all parties to the protocol and forward it to the Committee for Environmental Protection established by the protocol and publish notice of receipt of the CEE and request for comments on the CEE in the Federal Register and will provide copies to any person upon request. The EPA will accept public comments on the CEE for a period of 90 days following notice in the Federal Register. The EPA, in consultation with other interested federal agencies, will evaluate the CEE to determine if the CEE meets the requirements under Article 8, Annex 1 to the protocol and the provisions of this part, and will transmit its comments to the operator within 120 days following publication in the Federal Register of the notice of availability of the CEE. So, now, I'm sure most of you probably just went brain dead when I read that, so let me explain it. First, our CEE, that's our Comprehensive Environmental Evaluation, must pass the EPA's initial review. Not an easy task. Next, the Department of State, along with its Office of Ocean and Polar Affairs Bureau of Oceans, Environment, and Science, must review it. Next, it will be sent to all parties. That's 100 countries, by the way. Next, your assessment must be approved by an international bureaucracy called the Committee for Environmental Protection. After their highly unlikely approval, the EPA will then publish it in the United States Federal Register. Now, why would they do that? Because any supposed private tree-hugging group can now sue to stop you from going there. Once that is done, assuming you haven't been sued, then the EPA, along with all of the other interested federal agency, whatever the hell that means, evaluates it again. Do you realize the amount of legal work this would entail? Do you realize how easy it would be for any one of hundreds of entities or thousands of bureaucrats to halt your expedition? Again, this applies to all countries. One person in the comments of my last Antarctic video claimed that it wasn't necessary in the United Kingdom. Well, he lied. The Environmental or Madrid Protocol is part of the Antarctic Treaty system and applies to all countries. Here is the requirement on the UK application if you're interested. As explained above, for every person in the United States who wants to get a permit to travel across Antarctica has to first submit the environmental impact assessment to the EPA. You know, the freedom-loving EPA.
Well, anyway, one time I got on the, I tried to book a passage on one of, everybody, all these propagandists always send me these links to, oh, you can book a cruise and thousands of people are going to Antarctica. It's absolutely wrong. It's not true at all. Very few cruises are actually going over there, and they just go to like those little small outskirts there areas. But I actually tried to book a cruise. I brought out my credit card and got on their website and tried to pay for a cruise, and it didn't work. And it wasn't that my credit card was declined. The website did not work. It just went around in circles. And what cruise company would have it that you cannot actually pay for your cruise? You go bankrupt in no time. And I just thought that was pretty hilarious that here is this one of these links that one of the propagandists gave me, and I couldn't actually even purchase a ticket to get on that cruise. And that's what I think a lot of these things are. You can buy a ticket, they'll put you on, and they'll say, oh, sorry, that got canceled. Then you just wasted, they'll give you a refund, but you just wasted money on airfare and everything else.
Yeah.
And what about all these, propagandists kept saying they're going to fly an airplane across Antarctica? What happened to that guy? We always get these. And remember that one guy that stole all everybody's money with that Antarctic flight?
Man.
It got canceled as well. And of course the propagandists don't come out and go, well, that's really strange that they would do that. They don't ever question. It's like, that's perfectly normal.
I remember, that guy. I forgot his name. Sapien, something Sapien.
Yeah.
What's his name? Sapien.
Yeah,
something
you're right.
Sapien. Yeah, man. $19,000, man. He paid for that, and
And they'll keep doing it. They'll keep having little things. I'll show all these flat earthers. I'm going to fly across, and they'll never have another video about it saying, hell, for some strange reason, the FAA wouldn't allow us to do that. It must be too cold, right?
Too cold, man.
So I'm going to show you some different things about Antarctica. So hopefully you see the difference between good research and just typing something into YouTube and saying, oh, there's the proof. Anybody can go to Antarctica because these people say they've been there. Let's move on and get into these cruises into Antarctica. First of all, you can see on the screen here that they all go to these ports only. So you'll see that is a very small section of a gigantic continent where people would all assemble and all the little cruise ports would be there. So that's very interesting. And a lot of people like me have been working very hard to figure out what is going on in Antarctica. And so what I did was I wanted to go ahead and look into booking myself a little cruise.
But what they don't do is patrol the entire Antarctica, because anybody can go there. And what I find utterly stupid is the fact that there's literally tens of thousands of people moving over Antarctica every single week.
So the first thing I will do is show you why not everyone can go there. And the second thing is I don't usually call people liars, so I'm just going to ask for your evidence in claiming that tens of thousands of people fly across Antarctica every week. That's what you said. So show me the proof of flying across Antarctica. If you look up any flight charts, they don't fly across the continent at all. So show your evidence on that one. On the screen now, you'll see why not everyone can go to Antarctica. Because not everyone has between $40,000 and $75,000 for a 5 or 6 day trip. So I'm on this site. It's called polarcruises.com. I'm looking at all their little deals, and it looks like a scam to me because you don't need that kind of money for a trip to Antarctica. So anybody charging you $45,000 to $75,000 for a 5 day trip where you're staying in a tent and peeing in a bucket, there's a problem there. So I also looked up and tried to find out how many people fit on one of these planes, and they usually have 66 people on the plane. And if you multiply that by the ticket price of $40,000, you get about $3 million. So this is where I start to smell scam. To make that kind of money is not necessary on upcharging that much. So the first thing I did was run the site through Whoisology. Really cool site if you're looking for the owner of a site or IP information, registrar information. And when I found it, I got some other interesting news. He owns over 150 other related domains besides polarcruises.com. In fact, look at all these. This travel agency or scam center have all the Antarctic and Arctic trips in their hands. You must go through them. So that was just more fuel to my fire. Sites like penguincruise.com, Antarctica Cruise, Antarctica Tour, Antarctica Trip, Polar Bear Cruises, Antarctic Voyage, Antarctic Journey, Antarctica Journeys, Arctic Voyages, Antarctic Tour, Antarctic Vacations with a hyphen, Antarctic Trip, Antarctic Adventures, Antarctica Cruise. So, as you can see, he definitely has the corner on the market. Next up was to find out, are they even in business, or is it an all-out scam? Now, I hope you are ready for this story to get a little bit juicy. Thanks for holding on so far, because it's about to get real interesting. So in looking at the page here that lists the employees, I'd already looked up Jim, couldn't find anything. He's the one who owns all the domains. I looked up Sharon, couldn't find much. Again, both Jim and Sharon have very non-unique names. But Chuck and his wife, Lynn, were easy to find. Here you're looking at Chuck Cross. He is a Antarctic polar expedition leader, so it says. So is his wife. But they only have one photo of themselves all online. So, I mean, if you can search Google, I did here in a second, you'll see it on the screen. And that even putting her name and Bend, Oregon, where they supposedly live, turns up just that one photo and only articles that look like they come from their site or are in regards to them being travel agents. You can see here, just that one picture up at the top. So that left me with one other person. And I looked her up, and I always thank my lucky stars when I see somebody with a unique name. They're usually easy to find online. Her name is Nina Spinrad. So here it talks about her being an outdoor lover. And so I began to search Spinrad, Nina, and I get a ton of results for a Dr. Richard W. Spinrad. Who is he? Well, he was named in 2014 as the NOAA Chief Scientist by Barack Obama. Then I see Mr. Spinrad was the president of research at Oregon State before his appointment as head of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Center. And, of course, we know that this travel agency is based in Oregon. So, prior to that, he was the research director for the U.S. Navy. He also is part of the Global Warming Lie, as he is a direct and permanent representative to the United Nations Intercontinental Oceanographic Commission. He has been given awards from Bush and Obama, and now there's no way that this Nina is related to him, right? So I found a obituary for a Gene Thompson. And if you're ever looking for relationships, the best place to go is obituary, since it spells it right out for you. And in Gene Thompson's obituary, he was survived by his daughter, Elena, and her husband, Dr. Richard Spinrad, and their son, Gary, and his wife, Nina Spinrad. So for those of you following along, we now have one company who owns all the domains for Arctic and Antarctic trips. It has 5 employees. One of them is the daughter-in-law of the head honcho and President Barack Obama's selection for chief scientist for the NOAA. So that means we have a Navy veteran, a military man who has taken a military oath in charge of the ocean as chief scientist, just like all of our scientists who went to the moon, who are on the ISS or are currently or former military. Worth noting, if you spend 10, 20, 30 years in the military and then you get honorable discharge or you leave or retire, you are then considered a civilian. So if you become an astronaut, you are a civilian astronaut. So when we look closely, we can see that honestly, most of what we think of as science has been militarized. Also wanted to point out, if you look at the screen now, you'll see I did some flight tracking. And I don't see any planes that are going anywhere near the Antarctic landmass, which really only makes sense when you think of Antarctica being the ring around the flat plane. If it were a giant continent on the bottom of a globe, why wouldn't we be crossing it to go from Australia to South America, etc.?
Well, what's going on in Antarctica? Why so much secret, and why do we need an international treaty to protect Antarctica?
I'm on board Norwegian Star. Our ship is not going to Antarctica. They secretively changed the name of this cruise yesterday on the app from South America and Antarctica to a round trip South America. According to the customer service desk, this decision was made by head office in Miami before we departed, and it was for operational reasons. They refused to explain what those operational reasons are. We know it's not weather, so what is the reason? We started talking to people last night. Everyone was angry. We told people to join us here at 9:30 this morning, and look at all the crowds that have turned up. Customer service are refusing to acknowledge us. They've sent their security officer out to calm us down, but we just refuse to be told, sorry, we're not going and we're not going to give you reasons. We feel we're being cheated, being scammed. This is the security officer telling everyone to calm down. Now, everyone on this ship has paid a lot of money to cruise to Antarctica, not to do a round trip of South America at sea. We are being dismissed, ignored, refused answers. They're telling us we just have to accept it. Well, guess what? We've paid too much money, we're too smart, and we're too angry to just order another cocktail and sit down and accept the fact that our money has vanished into Norwegian cruise lines' pockets. We've not seen or heard from the captain, interestingly, not one announcement from the captain, nothing. So we're angry, we want to be heard, we want answers, we want transparency, we want clarity. I'll tell you one thing, don't ever take a Norwegian cruise. It is, they are treating us with absolute disdain, disrespect. They think we're idiots. We're not idiots. And we're not prepared to just accept this sitting down. We may not get to Antarctica. The chances of this cruise now going to Antarctica are minimal.
All right. Requires any person organizing a non-governmental expedition, right here, to or within Antarctica to prepare an environmental document. Unless an operator determines and documents that a proposed activity will have less than a minor or transitory impact on the Antarctic environment, the operator will prepare an IEE or CEE. If an operator determines they will have only a minor impact, they must submit a preliminary environmental review to the EPA for review no less than 180 days before proposed departure of the expedition. The EPA will provide comments to the operator, and the operator shall have 75 days to prepare a revised PERM or an IEE if necessary. Depending on what the EPA determines, which, by the way, if you might have to be using the bathroom or bring external water supply or fuel supplies or equipment, then you're screwed. Depending on what the EPA determines, an operator could have to submit an initial environmental evaluation or a comprehensive environmental evaluation. The cost of such a process is difficult to determine, but according to the GAO, they estimate that a typical EIS costs from $250,000 to $2 million. EAs and CEs generally cost less than EIS, according to CEQ and federal agencies. Given that expertise on Antarctica would be severely limited, costs for an environmental study could be very costly, and then you could still be denied access.
You recruit true earthers more than any of us ever could. They see grown men spiral on the internet for years, lying about stuff like the Antarctic Treaty. Flat earthers say you can't go to Antarctica. They're so stupid. You can just get a tour there. No, we say you can't privately and freely explore Antarctica. You can only go where they allow you to. They wait a couple minutes, then they say it again. Flat earthers say you can't go to Antarctica, and that's just patently wrong. You definitely can. They have to lie. They're scared because they know if they go to Antarctica, it'll prove them wrong. Weird, bruh. It's weird that you're like a grown adult and you're suffering from cognitive dissonance so much that you allow yourself to think that somehow makes sense to behave like that. I think it's weird.